Hi, guys. Today I'm going to read you a story from one of my favorite authors, Patricia Polacco. I love almost every single one of her books. She has a great story, a great personal story, and she is also a fantastic illustrator. And she likes to write about things that have actually happened to her in her life. So it's kind of a neat connection. So today I'm going to read you Fiona's Lace. Fiona's Lace. Many years ago, my father's family lived in a small, poor village a few miles from Limerick in Ireland. Everyone in the village had a textile mill that was soon to close. Most of the villagers were unsure of their futures, but Glencarry was their home and all that any of them had ever known. My great-grandfather, Fiona told him later that my father's great-grandfather, Fiona told him later that she was her younger sister. My great-grandfather, Fiona, told him later that she and her younger sister, Ailish, used to wait by their front gate almost every day to greet their father as he came home from the mill. Sorry, that's hard to read. Their mother, Annie, was known far and wide for her hearty soups and lovely bread. Supper in the Hughes household was a celebration of good food, but the best part of the supper for Fiona and Ailish was to hear their father Mick tell grand stories. Their father's eyes blazed as he began. "Now you can believe this or you can believe it not," he started. The girls and their mother leaned in. "Back when your mother and I worked at the textile mill in Limerick, I used to walk by the lace parlor on my way to lunch." He paused. Fiona smiled broadly at Ailish. They knew this story by heart. "This is when I saw the most beautiful little lady I've ever laid eyes on." "Oh, such talk, Mick." Their mother blushed. "So I asked all the other girls in her parlor where she lived so I could come a calling and spark her, get her attention. But not one of them would tell me. One day as I left the mill, I noticed a lovely bunch of lace tied to a bush just down the lane. I could see little other bits of lace tied to trees, brushes, front stoops, and lampposts further on. I recognized her lace, so I followed it down the paths and lanes until they stopped just in front of a darling little cottage. I looked further on and saw no more of them, so I knew this was your mom's house." Fiona and Ailish tittered, which means they laughed. "'Twasn't more than a fortnight that I started courting your mom. We were married right here at St. Timothy's, and I brought my bride home this very house, but carried her over the threshold just there. Both you girls were born right here next to the hearth," their mom added. "To think a trail of lace brought you to our mom," Fiona said dreamily. Then, just as she did every morning, Fiona ran to get her first day's handiwork to show her father. Her mother was teaching her how to be a fine lace maker. "Mom showed me her secret run and stitch today," Fiona said proudly as she held a small pillow covered with lace in front of her father's face. "Ah, Fiona, your mom was one of the finest makers of lace in all of Limerick," father said wistfully as he stared at her mom. "Such the arthritis stopped all of that, Mick," Annie said quietly. She tried to smile, but it was heartbreaking to them that all of Annie's fingers were swollen with pain. "Fiona will be grander than I ever hoped to be, and as soon as she's old enough, we'll take her to the parlor in Limerick, and she'll be their best." Annie crowed proudly as she inspected her daughter's lace. Times were already hard in all of Ireland, but harder still in Glencarry. The mill closed as rumored. It broke many a man and forced families to leave all they knew and seek work elsewhere. "Where will we go, Mick?" Annie said one day. Her heart was deeply troubled. One day, their neighbor, Miss O'Flaherty, spoke to Annie over their back fence. "My Jocko and I have signed a contract. That's all we had to do to get passage to America." "A contract to do what?" Annie asked. "To serve a wealthy family in America. We're going to be in domestic service for them. You mean you'll be their maid? Annie asked. Of course, and Jocko will help on the grounds. The wealthy family will pay our way there on a ship. All we have to do is promise to work for them until the passage is paid off, Miss O'Flaherty answered. What happened? When Annie told Mick that evening, they stayed up into the wee hours of the night talking about it. Within a week, they too went to an agency and signed a contract to work for a family in Chicago, America. Chicago, America? Fiona yelped. Part of her was excited because she'd heard so much about America, but part of her was sad, for she loved her little village. For the next week, it was hard for them. They had to decide what to take with them and what to leave behind. The last night they were home, Fiona and Ailish put out a bowl of milk for the leprechauns and the wee people, the fairies, as they'd done all of their life. Fiona and America's servants have servants of their own. The streets are paved with gold, and we shall live in a fancy house. If only we could take the wee people to America with us. Do you think we could? Ailish asked her sister. No, Ailish, I think the only place the wee ones can be happy is here where the woodbine twineth near the forest, here in Glencarry. That next morning, Fiona's mother and father bade tearful farewells to lifelong friends. After old Mr. Fitzgerald helped them load the last bundle on the wagon, the family climbed aboard. As they left their homestead and village, they all looked back as long as they could. When they crested the hill, their beloved village disappeared behind a grove of trees. Ailish and Fiona cried for miles, and so did their mom. Their father just stared off into the distance. They traveled most of the night and part of the next day. When they arrived in Belfast, they made their way directly to the shipyard to board the steamer that was bound for America. As the ship pulled away from the docks, they took one last look at their beloved island. Crossing the Atlantic was long and hard, and almost everyone aboard was seasick and miserable. To pass the time, Fiona made lace. Yards and yards of lace. Finally, they neared the harbor in New York. They could hardly wait to step foot in America on dry land. And when they did, they barely had time to be processed way directly to the train station to catch their train to Chicago. On the train, there were no bunks or cots to sleep in. They had to take turns sleeping on the hard seats of the coach car. At least on the ship, we had bunks to sleep in, Annie said wearily. I think they're quite tired from traveling. Days passed. Fiona busied herself making more and more lace. The journey was bumpy, hot, and dusty. They stopped at many towns and cities. Every so many stops, they bought bread and cheese. Finally, one day, the conductor announced that they were approaching Chicago. We're here, Ailish crowed happily. They could see a big city, tall buildings off in the distance. I'm guessing the cattle are waiting to be slaughtered. The Americans eat well. I'll be bound. There must be a joint of beef on every table, their father sang out. Look, Mom, the sea is right next to Chicago. I wonder why the ship didn't bring us right here, Fiona asked. Well, that's Lake Michigan, folks. And it sure does look big enough to be the ocean, doesn't it? The conductor said. A large lake. At the depot in Chicago, there were drivers for hire with wagons to take travelers home. Fiona's father had the address of the rooming house that their employers had arranged. As they drove to the city, Fiona couldn't believe her eyes. Every building was grander than the last, row upon row of them. Elegant people were strolling with arms full of packages. Look at those lovely frocks, Annie sighed. That's another word for dresses. Made with fine Irish lace, I'll wager, Father added. Is this where we're going to be living? Ailish chirped excitedly. Our flat is on Dagen Street. Is that near here, the father asked? No, sir. We have quite a ways to go. The farther they drove, the clearer it became that they were coming into a part of Chicago that wasn't so grand. The streets were crowded and with brokers selling their wares from the wagon. The buildings and houses were shabby and run down. This is it, 120 Dagen Street, the driver sang out. Then he helped them unload and lugged their belongings up rickety stairs. Yoo-hoo, Annie! It was Miss O'Flaherty, their neighbor from Glencarry. We work for the same family. They told us you were coming. I tidied up your flat and made your beds. This must be a mistake, Mom. If you and Dad... Annie and the girls cleaned and swept while Father went for flies. After a good scrubbing, and after they covered the shabby old furniture with throws and quilts they brought, the two-room flat was almost livable. When they say flat, I think they mean apartment. They had never seen a place like it. The sink and dry kitchen were in one room, and the other room was crowded with 3 beds. Annie and Miss O'Flaherty worked as kitchen maids for the same family. It took them 3 trolley rides to get there each day. I can't wait for our first pay packet. The girls will be needing new shoes when they start school, Annie whispered as she scrubbed the floor. Pay packet, Miss O'Flaherty scoffed. Don't you know that you won't be getting paid for serving them? They paid your way here, so every penny that you earn belongs to them until you repay them. Remember, they're charging us rent for the rat trap we live in. They own it. And they'll be levying for your uniform as well, Pert Haggerty, another maid added. But how we live then, Annie muttered. You'll have to take second jobs and work in the evenings, darling. We all do, you know. I don't think she knew that. The other maids were quite right. Both Annie and Mick took second jobs. Mick at the slaughterhouse and Annie scrubbing laundry at a downtown hotel. But it wasn't long before Miss O'Flaherty told Annie about a posh dressmaker in the city. Miss O'Flaherty crowed. Annie to show the lace. Sure enough, they were hardly impressed. They made an offer on the spot to pay a pretty penny for lace. We'll buy as much as the girl can make. Sounds like a solution. Annie and Fiona got home and told Ailish and Father the news. They decided right then and there to have a party. Now we'll be able to save money and buy our own home right here in America, Annie called out as she danced around the room. I know just the place, too. We'll be crossing that great sea they call Michigan Lake. And we're going to buy land, Father sang out. We'll have a sweet farm and maybe some sheep, Ailish cooed. What is this place called where we'll be going, Dad? Michigan, he crowed. That evening, all of their neighbors gathered and sang, and Glass and her lace has saved the Hughes family, Miss O'Flaherty called out. The Lord bless us all, Annie whispered. The celebration went on until it was time for Mass the next morning to go to church. As the months passed, it wasn't long before the Hughes family had put away money in a tea tin on the high shelf in the kitchen. It was the month of October, and All Hallows Eve be coming, also known as Halloween. One night before their father and mother left for their night jobs, Father sat down to tell them a story. This is about the puka, the ghostly black horse that is harnessed to the Costa Bower, the carriage of death. The barn telling them quite a scary story. I don't want this story, Dad. I want to hear about the trail of lace that you took to find Mom again. Darling, you know that one by heart. I want to hear it too, Dad. I want to hear about Glencarry. I miss Ireland. You're pulling her sister. Good thing she's got the tea tin. They all but tumbled down the rickety stairs and made for the alley. There were people everywhere running and screaming. Miss Fiona looked back down the alley. She could see nothing but flames lapping at the sky. It was dark and smoky. Just then, a clanging bell, neighing horses, and thundering hooves rushed by. It's the puka in the Costa Bower, Alice screeched. No, it's the fire wagon. They're coming to put the fire. Where are Mom and Dad? Where are they? If our house burns down, how will they find us? Fiona didn't answer. They ran and ran until they tasted blood in the backs of their throats. Where are you going, Fiona? Where? We're doubling back to our house. The fire's already been there and won't be back. How will Mom and Dad find us? Fiona took out her bolt of lace. Her scissors were still around her neck. She pulled off some lace and started cutting it. No, Fiona, your beautiful lace. Ailish, it's the only way. We're going to have to leave a trail of my lace. That's how Mom and Dad will find us, Fiona said softly, trying to comfort her sister. Quite a sacrifice she's making. Just as Fiona tied her lace, her last piece of lace to the doorway of the basement, she and Ailish crawled in. They huddled there together for hours, through the darkness of the night. From time to time, Fiona thought she heard voices, but then they'd get faint and disappear. At morning's light, Ailish began to cry again. Mom and Dad should have found us by now. They should have. The trail of lace will bring them right here to us. I know it, Ailish. I just know it. What if they perished in this awful fire? There's nothing left of Chicago. Nothing. It was exactly at that moment that they heard a familiar voice. My lambs, my wee little lambs. It was their mother. She and their father were both clutching pieces of sooty lace. We'd been looking for hours. We'd almost given up. And that's when we saw it, the first little glimmer of hope. Your lace, Fiona. Your lace tied to a lamppost, her father cried. We followed it. We followed each and every bundle of it, and it brought us right to you, my darlings, right here to you. His father said as tears rolled down his cheeks. But, Mom, Fiona's lace is ruined. It's covered with smoke and soot. No, darling, this is her, the most beautiful creation, sootin' off where it saved you both, and us as well. We and generations after us will cherish this lace, Fiona, always. Always, their father exclaimed. Mick Hughes was right. I came home. Then I find myself thanking the Lord, and I remember that just as Annie charged her 2 daughters, that the home is worth Fiona. Thank you for your astonishing legacy, and most of all, thank you for your precious lace. The end.